A very warm welcome here on the program, the forum on Canal de English. Today, our guest is Mr. Nzie Clovis. He is the Dean of Studies of the Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School in Bounamousadi here in Douala. With him, we are going to talk about the falling standard of education in Cameroon and also what can be done to change everything and what does he at his own level, that is at RECOBES, the abbreviation of Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School, does to improve the standard of education in Cameroon. Once again, good morning, and it's a pleasure to have you tune onto programs of Canal de English. And the program now that you're watching is the Forum. And our guest today, as I said at the introduction of this program, is Mr. Nzie Clovis. He is the Dean of Studies of Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School here in Douala, in a neighborhood north of the economic capital called Bounamousadi. Mr. Nzie, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay. At the introduction of this program, I said, and it's not only what I'm saying, but many people around the country and even the world are complaining about the fall of the educational level of Cameroon or the Cameroonian students. What is the cause of it?
Thank you, sir. I think there are so many factors which may contribute to a fall in the educational standard of Cameroon. Basically, at our level, we can understand that with the recent times, we have so much distractions like games, TV, Facebook, internet, and the rest. So majority of our students who have access to these means of communication instead use them for the negative purposes or for the negative aspects and not for the positive aspects of education. Mm-hmm. Secondly, I think the way we handle educational matters, for example, the recruitment of teachers in some of our private schools or institutions around, the treatment of some teachers in private institutions, like the salary and things like that. Most proprietors go in for cheap teachers and the naive teachers who may not actually disturb them in the course of payments of their salaries and therefore really cause a problem in the lay private sector of education. More to that, we have the educational policies of Cameroon, like the newly instituted competency-based approach that is being put in place, where most teachers have not been sensitized, have not been orientated on how to handle the competency-based approach system of education, thereby pushing some teachers to do what is not really the competency-based system of approach, and it is not dogmatic or it is not the student-based approach that was first applied. So this really caused a problem to our educational system.
Okay, when you are talking about the private sector or the lay private sector aspect of education, do you think that the only cause of the fall in the standard of education is because of the private sector, or it is a general approach?
No, it is a general approach. It's a general phenomenon. Because even in the government sectors, most teachers now, when they leave ENS, what they really fight for is their arrears to be paid. Once the arrears have been paid, or the arrears, some of them delayed to be paid, you see some of them not really taking the job as a vocation, but taking it as a source of income or a source of livelihood.
A lot sort of livelihood. But before coming back to that, there's at the introduction, when you're responding to the question I asked, you said there's a problem, there's a new system of education being, or system of education or system of evaluation. I don't know which is which, but you talk about competence-based. Now, is it a new system of evaluation which has been introduced by the Ministry of Education?
It is not a system of evaluation. The system of evaluation which was introduced, I think, is some years back now, maybe 5 years, is the MCQ method of evaluation in the national exams. And it is now taking way in even our concours or entrance examinations into schools like the ENS now is MCQ. That's multiple choice questions. That is a system of evaluation. But presently, we are now in Form 2 with a competency-based approach system, which involves a teacher not necessarily giving or pouring material or standing at a hill, then preaching the gospel to students. That one was dogmatic. We left from dogmatic. We went to a child or student-based approach, which is now being left for competency-based approach, because every child is born with some competencies. We just need to develop the competencies of that child. That is why we say it is the competency-based approach. So we come from competencies and we don't let the children develop their competencies.
Okay.
And we don't give them notes as it used to be.
You don't give them loads as it used to be. Now let's come back about, you talk about dogmatic way of teaching, right?
Yes.
What was it all about?
The dogmatic system of education is that type where you consider a learner as knowing nothing, and you, as a teacher or the person who is involved in the teaching process, you know everything. And you just give or pour down knowledge to the person who is receiving. It was used in the primary system. The person willingly or unwillingly must get the information. So that was a really bad system of education, because there is nobody who actually does not know anything.
Okay, the question I would like to ask you is this. You say the primary system, like the nursery and primary system,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And what is bad in it?
No, actually, to me, a good teacher should blend all the systems of education, depending on the learner who is in front of you. That is my own opinion.
That's your own opinion.
Yes, but the government insists that we should use the competency-based approach, and that is where I see that there is a problem, because not every child is suited for competency-based approach, because some children are really very stubborn, and at those the tender ages, we need to force them to learn.
Which means that the dogmatic approach is not as bad as some of the things.
It's not 100% bad.
But
to a certain extent.
What will you say about some people who think that the dogmatic-based approach that has been left behind was better than the competency-based approach that is being used currently?
Well, due to the invent of or the coming in of human rights, where a child is not to be beaten, a child is not to be forced, to be pushed, therefore the system of education too is bound to change from the dogmatic.
What do you mean by beaten?
Like forcing a child to learn with a whip.
But is it a crime to use a whip to encourage a child to understand his or her lesson?
I am an African, and if not of a whip, I wouldn't be what I am today. But we are working in a state, and the state is made of laws. So therefore, we don't go out of the laws of a state because you think it's wrong. People who are up there, they decided and they have implemented the law that a child should not be beaten. And therefore, we as citizens of the country, we can only propose, but we cannot dispose.
You cannot dispose. But now, where do you teachers, you trainers, stand in all this? Does it mean that the government just sits in Yaoundé, or let's say in Boya or Bamenda, wherever they sit, devise a system of education, give it to you people without consulting, or does the government consult you guys before coming out with a kind of consensus educational approach?
They do, actually they do, but they do with the minority, not with the vast majority.
What do you mean by that?
Actually, when you go into the teaching corps today, about 30% is public, but 70% is the private. And most of the private teachers are not even known to say they will be questioned on an issue. Most of the questioning is done by mostly public teachers, that's government teachers, and inspectors and things like that. So they actually sanction the opinion of teachers, but it is the majority. Just about 30% are opportune. And the actual people who are in the field, most of them don't have the opportunity to express their views on issues.
And the question I wish to ask is what you said. You said the teachers in the private sector, or that represents about 70% of the teaching corps in the country, are not known. Why are they not known?
Actually, they are known by the level of the delegations, but some proprietors, they try to mask some of their teachers, maybe because some of the teachers are not competent, are not actually up to the task. So some of them, when handing the staff list to the delegation, there are some names which don't figure, or some of them even change their certificates, some teachers to have fake certificates and things like that. So all of that be put together actually is a problem.
It's a problem. Now, I would like to ask you personally, Mr. Nzie, where do you stand in this dichotomy? There's something like that, because some people are of the opinion that the base educational system or method of education should and must be the dogmatic system, because it has produced a lot of results, while others are of the opinion that we should modernize, we should adapt to the Western method of doing things, which you talk about competence-based approach. Where do you stand in these two systems?
Thank you. I, for one, I as a teacher, I use all the methods, depending on the learner who is in front of me. Sometimes you may have really stubborn children that if you don't spank, it won't go.
You spank the child.
You spank and it goes. Not actually abusing the child, but you use a method that the child is afraid of, like putting the cane in front of the child and say you beat. Sometimes the child is stimulated, and just because the adrenaline flows, that the child knows that if this man touches me, I will be, and you see how the child now sits up and follows what you have to do.
And do you think that the method works at primary or at secondary?
At all levels.
At all levels.
At the university. These days, if you go even to the university, you see some radical students who are actually supposed to be taught by the dogmatic method, because some of them even lack home training.
And which means that the school now tends to be where you have to train children, not the houses or homes where they come from.
Actually, like where I am in Douala, majority of the parents, they don't have time with their kids. 90% of the parents here are business people. It is the economic capital, we understand. So most of the time, the children are taught most of the things in school.
And in your opinion, do you think that the level of education of Cameroonian children today is better than it was in the past?
Actually, when we used to go to school, that is around the 80s, 90s, and today, there is a big difference with the setting of the exams, the styling of the exams, the styling of the teaching, the relationship between teachers and students even, because of recent, a teacher who is not like a friend to a student is considered as an enemy. And that student will automatically not follow the subject or the teachings of that teacher. Whereas if the teacher considers the student as a friend, as a companion in education, you realize that things go better. It is based on the children we have today, their mentality, and the mentality of everything around. We know with modernity, things are actually changing. And we must not say we are not changing. The world is changing and everything is changing. Even the educational system is changing, and every change has a good and a bad side.
And when I have somebody like you in front of me, you are a teacher. You are the Dean of Studies of Revival Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School, Bounamousadi. What system of education do you use in that your school?
Thank you, sir. Being an evening school, we have elderly people who happen to be people like our parents. There you cannot use
the dogmatic.
Even though it may be required, because the level of the people we have students actually who probably left school in class 3 in the primary school, sat home for about 20, 30 years. They have become drivers, mechanics, and things like that. But now they have seen the importance of education and they are coming back to school. What do? We receive the students, guide them, counsel them, evaluate them, and see at what level they are supposed to school. Because I cannot say Revival Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School is a secondary evening school. It starts from the elementary classes. We even have students who are to write the first school living certificate this year. Old adults who are actually willing to learn.
So what is like the average age of those registered in your school?
Actually, I have a parent who was born in 1959.
1959.
Older than my own father.
That's the oldest student?
Yes.
Is he a student or a pupil?
He is now a student in opposite commercial, but started there as a student in the lowest level, level 3.
Really?
And more to that, he happened to be a francophone.
He happened to be a francophone.
So he followed the 3 years program, wrote the ordinary level last academic year, and made it in 8 papers.
Made it in 8 papers?
Yes, 4 Bs and 4 Cs.
4 Cs. And now, what really made you, as an individual, to decide to open the Revival Comprehensive Bilingual School, evening school, and second, as a subsidiary question, and you opted for evening education. But let me bring it back. What made you to decide to open a school?
Thank you very much. Since when I was in the secondary, that is in Form 5, we usually have difficulties with some of our teachers. And I used to be like an intermediate student, intermediary, that is trying to
go between
teachers and students and negotiate certain things, even going as far as negotiating with other teachers of other schools to help us where we have difficulties. So I used to even help some of my classmates where we have difficulties, and things were going like that. That is when I developed interest in education. Leaving Kumba, where I did my secondary education, and coming to Douala with the university education, I had some time, and it happened that one of the prominent evening schools in Douala opted for my services. Being naive and young at that time, I went in as a young teacher undergoing training as a student too in the university. So that is how I began my career in the evening sector of education. I came to understand so many things and realized that socially, we educated people are better and we have certain advantages than less educated people. And more to that, I came to realize that due to the population of the evening school, where we had about 700 students in an evening school, I came to realize that there is really a social problem in terms of education, where majority of the people, a vast majority of the people, elderly people who work during the day have a problem of education because their ages don't permit them to go to regular schools. And more to that, they have difficulties of which we can help them. Leaving now because the school was in Omispo, I finished my university education, had my first degree in biochemistry, that's in the University of Douala. And I started looking for a job because at that time there was really a problem, as now, economic problem where there is joblessness. And that is how I found myself into teaching. Writing the ENS, the first year I passed, but I did not have enough finance that could finance me to go to Bambili for my education. So I decided to stay back and continue with my career of opening a school. So happening to be a teacher in Laureate Modern Bilingual College in Bounamousadi, I had some private classes, some private students who opted for me to help them in specific subjects. Being a science teacher, because I teach biology, and I'm an examiner with the Cameroon GC board for the past 5 years now. I came to realize that where we usually have our private or extra classes, that is after school, for catch-up, some students, elderly people too, and mature people who did not have opportunities to go to regular schools, were coming and they were actually willing to join us
To learn.
to learn. So I decided with some of my colleagues, because we are actually a group of teachers and we are 32 in number as of now.
32.
32 teachers.
From then that you decided
to open an evening school.
An evening school.
Which is different from the repetition or extra classes that we are holding.
And the question I would like to ask you, why did you opt for Bounamousadi rather than Omispo or elsewhere in the city of Douala?
Actually, Bounamousadi, what I realized since I am versed with Bounamousadi, I realized that majority of the Anglophone community there, especially the young girls, are majority house helps. Most of them are majority house helps, and they actually have difficulties in studying. So there we had a vast population coming in for studies, and that is why we decided to continue. And since I was already based in Bounamousadi, and most of the teachers are based in Bounamousadi, we decided to continue with the evening section.
So if I understand well, you are based, the majority of students in your school are girls.
Yes.
Because most of them also are house helps.
House helps, and some people are drivers, mechanics, and things like that.
And how do those students convince their employers to allow them to go to school?
Yes, actually, we negotiate some of the contracts, and I want to thank the community too, because most of them even they really appreciate the effort we are doing, helping their housemates. Some of them who could not read, you leave a note, they could not read. Some of them, even with the advent of internet, they are house helps in houses where they have access to internet, Facebook, Twitters, and things like that. But they are unable to manipulate because they cannot read or write. But now I think we are per year we help about 120 to 30 students.
Really? Now, which means how many students are registered in your school currently?
Actually, I have 134 students registered in the evening section.
And what has been your results in terms of, let's say, A levels and GCE?
Actually, I don't think speaking on air will be...
No, it's important as a teacher. We want to know whether...
Actually, the population can speak.
The population can speak, yes.
For the past...
You don't have statistics, do you?
I have.
Yes, why don't you?
Past year, okay, the last GC results, we had 86%.
86%.
Passed at the ordinary levels. We had 67% at the A levels commercials. Ordinary levels commercials, that is the least, the worst results we had 33%, because we had a very difficult situation to handle last year, since it was our first year of taking the commercial education. So the population was not there, and even to get the teachers too was a problem.
It was a problem.
But I think this year, everything has been put in place, and things will not be like that.
You are the Dean of Studies. Let me ask you a tricky question. Somewhere at a certain point in time, when we were doing this in the course of this interview, you said the government usually base their consultation on those in the public sectors, which in your opinion represents about 30% of the educational workforce. And you said the private sector is to be blamed because most of the proprietors don't present the real figures of their teaching core. Why?
Well, actually, I think most of the proprietors, most of the schools we have, their proprietors are basically businessmen and not teachers. If you look at the vast majority of the educational systems we have, the schools we have around, most of the proprietors are businessmen and not actually the teachers who have the mind to teach. So therefore, every aspect of the school is based on business and income making, and not the education and actually the students who matter much. But I think the government is really encouraging teachers to open schools. That is to favor them, and that's why there is a law that even in the primary sector, for you to be a proprietor of the primary sector, you should be at least a holder of the advanced levels, at least have a level of education. I think to that is an applause to the government.
An applause to the government. I would like to ask you this final question. Revival Comprehensive Bilingual Evening School, Bounamousadi. Do you respect the rules of law? Are your teachers well paid? Are all those teaching in your school recognized at the Regional Delegation of Education?
Thank you, sir. I believe all the teachers in my school or in our school, because I happen to be a teacher, all of us are teachers teaching in day schools all around Douala, and even some teachers come beyond Douala. So actually all the teachers in the evening school are teachers of they are day school teachers, and they are effective teachers.
And they are
so
effective
therefore, I know, and I wish to say they are recognized.
They are recognized.
The delegation.
Okay, Mr. Nzie Clovis, it was a pleasure having you here today as guest, and I hope that our viewers have appreciated your contribution and participation in this program today. And it's on this note that we are putting an end to this program for today, the forum. We hope to have you again tomorrow, but please do not go away. Stay tuned to programs on Canal de English.